You believe you're awake right now, moving through a world you understand. But what if I told you that this very certainty is the deepest form of sleep? The moment of true awakening, when it finally comes, won't bring comfort. It will terrify you. Not because what you discover is inherently frightening, but because everything you've built your identity upon dissolves in an instant. The solid ground beneath your feet? Gone. The separate self you've defended your entire life? An illusion. The future you've been chasing? A mirage. You see, most seek awakening as an achievement, another possession for the ego. But true awakening isn't something you gain. It's everything you lose. You see, we go about our daily lives believing we are conscious, aware, awake. We drive to work. We talk to our friends. We make decisions. We feel emotions. And because we're doing all these things, we assume we must be awake. But this is precisely the first veil of sleep that blinds us from true awakening. Let me tell you something about the nature of sleep and wakefulness. There are three veils of sleep that we mistake for being awake, and until we recognize them, we remain caught in this dream we call ordinary life. The first veil is mistaking thought for reality. Think about it. How much of your day is spent lost in a stream of endless thinking? Planning, worrying, remembering, fantasizing. This constant mental chatter we believe is so necessary is actually the primary mechanism of our sleep state. Just as a dreamer at night is completely identified with the dream, believing it to be real while dreaming, we are identified with our thoughts, believing them to be who we are. A fish doesn't know it's wet. It's so completely immersed in water that it has no concept of wetness. Similarly, we're so immersed in our thinking that we don't recognize it as just one aspect of consciousness, not consciousness itself. When was the last time you experienced reality without the filter of your thoughts telling you what everything means? When was the last time you simply witnessed life as it unfolds without immediately labeling and judging it? The second veil of sleep is the illusion of separateness. We perceive ourselves as isolated entities, separate from everything else, walking around in a world of other separate things and beings. But this perception is the very heart of our sleeping state. What if I told you that this boundary between you and the world isn't actually real? It's a useful convention, certainly, like drawing borders on a map. But the map is not the territory. The lines we draw don't exist in the landscape itself. Nature reveals this truth everywhere we look. Consider a tree. Where does the tree end and the earth begin? Its roots extend into the soil, drawing nutrients. Its leaves absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide, exhaling oxygen. The rain that falls becomes its sap. Is the tree separate from the earth, the sun, the air, the rain? Or is it one expression of a unified process we call life? The third veil of sleep is our addiction to time. But here's the thing. The future never arrives. The past is gone. All we ever have is this moment. Yet we spend our lives either leaning forward into a future that exists only in our imagination, or looking backward at a past that's no longer here. We're like someone dying of thirst while floating on a raft in the middle of fresh water, unable to drink because we're looking elsewhere for satisfaction. I knew a man who spent 30 years meditating, seeking enlightenment. Every day he would sit, trying to awaken, striving for that breakthrough moment. And for 30 years, awakening eluded him. Why? Because his very striving was reinforcing the illusion of a separate self who needed to achieve something. The harder he tried to wake up, the deeper he fell into sleep. You see, This is the great paradox of spiritual awakening. The very effort to wake up often strengthens the illusion of the separate self who is trying to wake up. The ego co-opts the spiritual journey, turning it into another achievement, another identity. I'm a spiritual person. I'm an advanced meditator. I'm someone seeking enlightenment. And with each new spiritual identity, the true nature of awakening moves further from reach. It's like trying to grab water. The tighter you clench your fist, the less water you hold. The harder you try to wake up, the deeper you fall into sleep. Now here's the thing about awakening that most spiritual teachers won't tell you. It isn't all bliss and light and transcendent joy, at least not at first. True awakening is terrifying. It will shatter your sense of self. It will shatter your certainties. It will shatter your very framework of reality. Why is it so frightening? Because what we call awakening is actually the collapse of everything you believe yourself to be. The solid ground of your identity suddenly falls away. Imagine discovering that the autobiography you've been writing your entire life is actually a work of fiction. Every achievement, every failure, every memory that makes up the story of you is revealed as just that. A story, not reality itself. I remember someone who experienced this sudden awakening during an ordinary moment while washing dishes. The plates, the soap, the water, the hands, all normal, until suddenly nothing was normal. The boundary between the hands and the water dissolved. The stories about being a certain person with a certain life collapsed. There was just this happening, with no one at the center making it happen. And it was absolutely terrifying. Not because something bad was occurring, but because everything they had used to orient themselves in existence had vanished. We cling to our illusions with such remarkable determination. Even as they cause us immense suffering, we defend them as if our lives depend on them. Isn't that absurd? We protect our wounds. We guard our limitations. We fight for our right to remain asleep. We are like prisoners who have lived so long in a cell that when someone opens the door, we shut it again. The familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. The terror of awakening comes from the ego's recognition of its own demise. The separate self senses its approaching dissolution and reacts with fear. It's not personal, it's mechanical. Any structure that has maintained itself for decades will resist being dismantled. Your thoughts will race. Your heart will pound. Your mind will generate emergency stories about going crazy or losing control. When the solid sense of being a separate entity dissolves, what replaces it feels like freefall. There's no center to orient around, no reference point, no inside or outside, no past or future. Just this vast immediacy that contains everything yet can't be contained. I've seen this terror grip even the most dedicated spiritual seekers. They spend years saying they want to awaken, yet when the first glimpses come, they retreat. They intellectualize the experience. They try to fit it back into the framework of what they already know. They do anything to avoid the total surrender that true awakening demands. Think about how we live. We plan for futures that never arrive exactly as we imagine. We cling to pasts that exist only as neural patterns in our brains. We define ourselves by our bodies, our roles, our possessions, our relationships, our beliefs. What happens when you suddenly see through all of that? What happens when you realize there is no separate self doing or experiencing anything? Everything you've used to define yourself is revealed as ephemeral, conditional, impermanent. The ego's response is terror, pure existential terror. You stand at the edge of what feels like an abyss, being asked to step forward into seeming nothingness. Every cell in your body screams no. Every thought tells you to turn back. This is the threshold that separates the spiritually curious from those who truly awaken. But let me tell you what waits on the other side of this terror. It isn't more terror. It isn't annihilation. It's a freedom so profound that the mind cannot conceive of it beforehand. Yet the only way to discover this freedom is to move through the terror, not around it. You must be willing to lose everything you think you are. Everything. Your identity, your beliefs, your sense of being a doer or a chooser, your very sense of existence as a separate entity. And this willingness cannot be faked. It cannot be intellectual. It must be total. What if I told you that this terror we've been discussing is merely the threshold, not the destination? What if I told you that on the other side of this existential fear lies a freedom so vast, so complete, that no words can fully capture it? It's like the relief of putting down a heavy burden you didn't know you were carrying until the moment it's gone. Suddenly, your natural lightness returns, and you realize you've been unnecessarily straining under this weight your entire life. When we move through the terror of ego dissolution, we discover what I call the 4 freedoms of awakening. These aren't freedoms that you achieve or attain. They're freedoms that reveal themselves as inherent to your true nature once the veils of sleep begin to dissolve. The first freedom is the freedom from self-concern. Think about how much energy we expend worrying about ourselves. How am I doing? Am I good enough? What do others think of me? Will I get what I want? Will I avoid what I fear? This constant self-referential anxiety consumes most of our life force. But what happens when the separate self is seen through? All that energy is suddenly liberated. It's like a tight fist that finally relaxes, releasing all the tension it didn't even know it was holding. After awakening, the internal dialogue shifts from constant worry to open curiosity. Instead of "where did I go wrong?" it becomes simply "what is this experience?" Instead of "how can I protect myself?" it becomes "how can awareness move through this situation?" The exhausting burden of maintaining and defending a separate identity falls away. The second freedom is the freedom from time. We spend our lives either leaning forward into an imagined future or looking backward at a remembered past. But when awakening occurs, the hypnotic spell of time weakens its grip. You discover that life only ever happens now. This isn't a concept or a nice spiritual idea. It's a direct recognition that this moment is all there ever is, all there ever has been, all there ever will be. Have you ever noticed how much suffering exists only in relation to time? Regret, guilt, and nostalgia pull us into the past. Anxiety, dread, and craving push us into the future. But what discomfort exists in the actual immediacy of now, free from the stories about what it means for past or future? The third freedom is the freedom from knowing. We are addicted to certainty. We want to understand everything, categorize it, fit it into our existing frameworks. This constant need to know creates a rigidity in our experience. But awakening brings the exhilarating freedom of not knowing, of meeting each moment fresh, without preconceptions. After awakening, a spaciousness emerges in consciousness. Is this good or bad? I don't know. Should I be doing something else right now? I don't know. What will happen next? I don't know. And this not knowing isn't ignorance. It's a profound openness that allows life to reveal itself without the distorting filters of conceptual understanding. We think we want answers, but what if the real freedom lies in releasing the compulsion to have life figured out? What if embracing uncertainty is actually the door to a much vaster reality than our minds could ever conceive? The fourth freedom is the freedom from separation. This is perhaps the most profound. The recognition that you are not separate from anything in existence brings an end to the deep existential loneliness that haunts the human condition. The boundary between inside and outside dissolves. You are the world experiencing itself from a particular vantage point. You may ask yourself after an awakening glimpse, where do I end and the world begins? And no clear answer emerges. The sensation of air on skin. Is it the air touching you or you touching the air? The sounds you hear, are they outside you or appearing within consciousness itself? The thoughts that arise, are they yours or simply arising in awareness like clouds in the sky? This doesn't mean you become unable to function in the conventional world. On the contrary, you can still use the concept of separateness when it's practical, just as you can use a map to navigate while recognizing that the lines on the map don't exist on the actual landscape. What would your life be like if you no longer felt isolated, cut off, fundamentally alone? What would relationships feel like if they weren't transactions between separate selves, but expressions of the one reality encountering itself? What love might be possible beyond the boundaries of separate selves? The great paradox of awakening is that by losing everything, you gain the universe. By surrendering the separate self, you discover that you are everything. By giving up control, you find perfect flow. By releasing the known, you open to infinite possibility. But here's the thing about the terrifying experience of awakening that I've been describing. It's not the end. It's the beginning. That moment of dissolution, that falling away of everything you thought you were, is actually the doorway to authentic living. The fear is temporary. The freedom is eternal. What does it mean to live from awakeness rather than from the dream of separation? It means that ordinary life continues, but it's infused with an extraordinary quality of presence and immediacy. The dishes still need washing. The bills still need paying. The body still gets hungry and tired. But none of these experiences are happening to someone. They're simply happening. Consider how you might approach an everyday task, like preparing a meal. Before awakening, your mind is elsewhere. Planning tomorrow, replaying an argument, caught in evaluation, good cook, bad cook, will they like it, should have bought different ingredients, constant commentary, perpetual dissatisfaction. But after awakening, the knife cutting vegetables, the sound it makes against the cutting board, the smell of onions, the sensation of heat from the stove, total intimacy with what is. No separation, no one preparing a meal, just meal preparation happening. This transformation extends to all areas of life. Work becomes not something you do to get somewhere else or achieve some future state, but an expression of your being in the moment. Relationships shift from transactions between separate selves to a recognition of the one consciousness meeting itself through different forms. Even difficulties and challenges are met differently, not as personal afflictions, but as waves in the ocean of experience. I knew someone who described their post-awakening experience with simple eloquence. Before awakening, they said, I was constantly seeking happiness and constantly afraid of losing it when I found it. After awakening, I realized that what I am is the space in which both happiness and unhappiness arise and dissolve. Neither defines me, neither threatens me. Both are welcome guests in the guest house of consciousness. This shift in identity from being a separate entity to being the awareness in which all experience appears transforms our relationship with emotions as well. Feelings still arise. Joy, sadness, anger, fear. But they move through like weather patterns in the sky of awareness. They're no longer personal, no longer mine. Just energetic expressions arising and dissolving of their own accord. We spend our lives avoiding pain and pursuing pleasure, not realizing that this very strategy keeps us trapped in the dream of separation. When we awaken, we discover that embracing everything, excluding nothing, is the true path to peace. Not the peace of having everything go your way, but the peace of no longer needing things to be different from how they are. The silent miracle of awakened living reveals itself in the most mundane moments. Standing in line at the grocery store, sitting in traffic, listening to someone complain, no resistance, no commentary, no separate self being inconvenienced or offended, just life happening, sounds, sensations, thoughts appearing and dissolving in the vast space of awareness. This is not a passive state. It's incredibly alive and responsive. Without the burden of self-concern, your energy is free to meet each moment freshly. Without the constant background noise of mental chatter, you hear the subtle whispers of intuition more clearly. Without the filter of beliefs and judgments, you see reality more directly. Think of it like this. You've been watching a movie, completely absorbed in the drama, identifying with a character, experiencing all the emotions of the story. Then suddenly you become aware that you're sitting in a theater watching light projected on a screen. The movie continues, but your relationship to it has fundamentally changed. You're no longer trapped in it. You're free to enjoy it without being defined by it. The terror of awakening that I spoke of earlier is like the moment of transition, where you're not sure if you're the character in the movie or the awareness in which the movie appears. It feels like death because, in a sense, it is. The death of an illusion, the death of mistaking yourself for a character in a story, rather than the open awareness in which all stories unfold. And yes, this death is frightening to the mind that believes itself to be separate. But it's a threshold fear, a doorway fear. On the other side is a freedom that was always yours, a peace that was never absent, a wholeness that needed no achieving. The terror is temporary. The freedom is eternal. The terror is temporary. The freedom is eternal. The terror is temporary. The freedom is eternal. So when I say that waking up will terrify you, I'm telling you a truth. But it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that what terrifies you will also liberate you. The dissolution of everything you thought you were reveals what you truly are. And what you truly are was never born and will never die, was never damaged and needs no healing, was never separate and needs no connecting. So I ask you this: what if the terror of awakening is not something to avoid, but the necessary threshold to the freedom you've been seeking your whole life? What if everything you're afraid to lose is precisely what's keeping you from discovering who you really are?